And I run the community education program here at Pardes, and the summer program. I'm responsible for a lot of the online learning, and I'm delighted to be here. We are in the throes of turbulent times. A pandemic rages, winds of elections are swirling around, and today in Israel, we are marking the yahrzeit, the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin. And yet, I'm going to talk about something different from all of that. David Bernstein and Leon asked me to talk a little bit about Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, who has been recently, sadly or unfortunately, diagnosed with cancer. And on Sunday, at Pardes, we're going to dedicate our learning for his speedy recovery. So why did they ask me to speak about Rabbi Sacks? And I want to share something which might be relevant to each of us. I'm lucky to have met Rabbi Sacks when I was a young undergraduate student, an enthusiastic madrich in the London youth group scene. I was an inexperienced teacher in Sunday schools at various different synagogues. And here's the remarkable thing. Rabbi Sacks, he wasn't yet chief rabbi, but he took me seriously. I got into conversation with him and floated an idea about a Jewish student conference. And he made sure it happened, presented me to his committee, who dedicated a remarkable amount of money so that 600 students would have an impactful Jewish experience. And from then on, suddenly we had a relationship. I find that whenever I talk to young, emerging rabbis and educators from the UK, anyone who sought out Rabbi Sacks, they all say the same thing. They all say, he encouraged me, he challenged me, he believed in me. And most importantly, he made me believe in myself. I once bumped into him in a Sepharim store, in a bookshop in Jerusalem. And he says to me, when are you coming to suffer with us in England? That was his phrase. But he let me feel that I was needed. As a rabbi and a Lord and a professor, you might imagine a person who's sort of aloof and removed. But he was the type of person who activated others. Once, when I was studying for the rabbinate, I managed to, on a visit to England, gain a precious half hour in his office. And I sent him I faxed him a whole loads of questions. He made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. His secretary came in to stop the meeting and he said, why do I have to do other things? I'm having so much fun. And then he gave me a petek, a small piece of paper. He said, this is my home phone number. Anytime you have questions like this, call me up. Any time of day and night. I'm an insomniac, I don't sleep. Here, let's schmooze some more. Every time he saw me, Alex, when are you bringing out a new book? What new project are you working on? Why am I sharing this with you? Because as Rabbi Sacks likes to say better than anybody else, good leaders create followers. Great leaders create leaders. He exemplifies this statement, but in fact, he attributes that to his Rebbe. And his Rebbe is the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And let me maybe relate to one of the most important encounters Rabbi Sacks ever had. And he talks about he was a young undergraduate student in Cambridge and visited America and managed to get a precious meeting, a yechidus, with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And he went in with a list of questions to ask the Rebbe, but in fact, the Rebbe was more interested in him. The Rebbe started asking him about Jewish life in Cambridge and said, well, how many Jewish students are there? And how many come to Friday night services? And says Rabbi Sacks, what he was essentially turning around to me, and he said it, why don't you do some more to enhance Jewish life in Cambridge? At some point in the conversation, Rabbi Sacks used a wonderful, wonderful British phrase. He said to the Rebbe, trying to make an excuse why he wasn't doing things, in the situation I find myself. And the Rebbe clapped on the table and he stopped him and interrupted him and said, what do you mean, in the situation I find myself? You put yourself into a situation, and if you want to, you can take yourself out of that situation. And what Rabbi Sacks was telling the young Jonathan, what the Lubavitcher Rebbe was telling the young Jonathan Sacks was to live his life deliberately and that he could make a difference. One of Rabbi Sacks' favorite Divrei Torah is on this week's Parsha. It's on the story of Abraham. And the question, of course, is how Abraham discovered God. And the Midrash goes something like this. Because, of course, Abraham says, God says to Abraham, Lech lecha, and they say it may be compared to a man who saw a palace in flames. He saw the house in flames and he says, where's the owner of the palace? And suddenly the owner of the palace comes out and says, I'm the owner of the palace. So Abraham, our father, said, is it possible that the world lacks a ruler? The Holy One, basically, he looked out and said, I am the ruler, the sovereign of the universe. And Rabbi Sacks writes, and I quote, Abraham was struck by the contradiction between the order of the universe, the palace, and the disorder of humanity, the flames. How is it that a world created by God could be so much evil? If someone takes the trouble to build a palace, would they allow it to be in flames? If somebody creates a universe, would they allow it to be in disarray? But the owner of the palace says, I'm the owner of the palace. It's as if God was saying to Abraham, I need your help. I need your help to bring it out of the flames. Since Rabbi Sacks stopped being chief rabbi, he's dedicated his life to the flames which are swirling around our world. He sees himself not as an Orthodox leader, not even as a modern Orthodox leader, but as a global voice for change and for moral living. He brings the Jewish tradition to address our contemporary society. In his 2015 book called Not in God's Name, he rallied against the impression that religion causes violence in the world and called for a religion which brings people together. In his most recent book, Morality, which just came out, he's talking about how we've moved from a collective culture, a we culture, to an I culture. And many of the maladies and the distressing features, whether it's depression amongst young people, whether it's the bitter end of identity politics, whether it's the notion that we have a public discourse where we don't trust what people say and we are unwilling to converse with people who are different from ourselves. And he's looking to find a way to bring us together, all drawing on Jewish sources, Hasidic sources, whatever it might be, to better our world. So on Sunday, Pardes is going to dedicate its learning to his refuah shlema, to his full recovery. He's the person who has made so many leaders in the world. He's a person who's making an impact on the global environment, both reminding Jews that Judaism is a groundbreaking, revolutionary message, giving us pride in our tradition, but also trying to use Judaism to impact the entire globe to create a better environment. We desperately need Rabbi Sacks to be healthy, to keep his work, and we wish him refuah shlema. And now on Sunday when we're learning, I hope people will have a better idea of the type of person we're dealing with and who he really is. Thank you and Shabbat Shalom.